So, hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another mentor chat that we bring in today. Today's mentor chat is particularly interesting and exciting for me because it's from one of my Lean-In sisters from Lean-In Bangalore, and also because it's on a very important topic for all the entrepreneurs on our platform, startme.com. Without any further ado, I want to introduce Hena Mehta. She's the founder and CEO of Basis, a first of its kind platform that powers financial independence for women through targeted content, cohesive communities, and curated financial services. Previously at the Goldman Sachs, Eastap, and Square, Hena has 10 plus years of experience in fintech in software engineering and product management roles, both in India and the US. She's also the founder of Lean-In Bangalore, and she has an MBA from the Wharton School and a computer science engineering degree from University of Pennsylvania. Thank you so much, Hena, for taking our time today and joining us for this exclusive session that we have planned for the premium section of our partners and community members at startme.com. The discussions for today would be centered around how entrepreneurs can survive this pandemic. Thank you so much, Hena, for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Rashmi, for inviting me for this chat.
So, without any further delays, let's just get started and dive into and answer the elephant in the room. Everything around is changing. The business situation is changing. So how do you think the changing situation changes the dynamics, particularly for the entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think we've all heard the word unprecedented like a million times, right, over the last several weeks. Now, what we're seeing play out in front of us, I don't think anyone has ever seen before or has planned, in their business plans or contingency planning or BCP and, all these things companies typically do, right? So I think in a lot of ways it is what it is, but in a good way, if you want to look at it positively, it's kind of it sets like the same level for everyone, right? Like we're all going through the same pandemic and the same crisis and all of that. It is unfortunate, I think, what I've seen play out in especially the tech startup scene, etc. Like, several companies have unfortunately had to shut down. That is unfortunate. I mean, some industries will take really, really long to recover, right? So that's the bit of the, the bad news that's come out of this. And, we've heard of layoffs and things like that. But I think for those who are able to survive, it's this is an opportunity, right? Because there is I don't want to say less competition, but there's just like less happening, smaller, like folks who didn't survive, but for the ones who are, there is an opportunity to really build and grow and execute on your plans. I think if anything, entrepreneurs are just as a personality nimble and agile and have to pivot and all those things. So if anything, we were like built to like figure out what to do in this crisis. So through the Basis community, actually, where like you said, we are a platform that focuses on financial independence for women, and obviously there are a lot of women who've started their businesses, etc. And we've loved hearing stories of how they've literally pivoted and changed business strategies like in the course of like a week or 10 days, right? So I think that's also something that entrepreneurs may have to think of. Like if your business is pivotable and you have the cash to kind of sustain that phase, then pivot, right? Like that's what it is about being an entrepreneur and being resilient, if you will. So I think I've kind of seen it across the spectrum. But for those of us who were able to survive this, it's it's a massive opportunity, and we should basically try to ride the wave.
Glad how you put it. For most of us who are using the words crisis, unprecedented situations, and all of that, I love how you said that it's an opportunity to focus on making our operations and our systems and businesses much more agile and increasing flexibility. I love your spirit, and I think that's the best way to actually get started with this meta chat. Going into a little more detail, particularly about the trends that will evolve, the complete dynamics. There's going to be a complete new set of job roles that will become much more prevalent and important. Similarly, some set of strategies that will become much more lucrative. And so let's talk about those emerging trends with context to the micro entrepreneurs and micro entrepreneurs and women at home, who are mompreneurs. How do you think those trends will come out?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things, right? So on the consumer front, so depending on obviously who your customers are, it'll be important to understand what's going to change in their behavior, right? So, I mean, we are both of us are at home right now. We're logged in, like this has been basically our normal for the last 3 months at least. That if and that's expected to be the case, right? Like even if things are opening up, I'm in Bangalore right now. It's things have practically all opened up, but people still aren't going out, right? So basically trying to understand what those behavioral changes will be, whether it's to do with, I mean, just day-to-day life, right? Like traveling or within your city or neighborhoods, how you're consuming food, what you end up spending on, how you're managing things at home with your families, things like that, right? So I think one key thing is we all hear there are going to be sort of even permanent changes in how people behave, if not like permanent, but at least for the foreseeable future. Right, so I think that's important to understand, and I think the other thing is just going to be a very so this sort of also is partially an answer to your previous question is there is going to be quite a bit of like scrutiny on what you're spending on in your business, right? So as entrepreneurs, we anyway have to be extremely mindful. We have to justify every pesa being spent on whatever it is, whether it's marketing, whether it's hiring, whether it's inventory, whatever it is, depending on your business. So that becomes sort of all the more important. And I would say, yeah, I know I said two things, but the third thing, and it's exactly what you and I were chatting about right before this call, is I think going digital was anyway a massive trend before. Now it's not sort of optional anymore, right? Like you and I run different communities. We basically had to pivot, and no more in-person meetups, no more face-to-face, right? It's sad, but it's the reality of our lives. And the great thing is we have technology to kind of go back on. So as much as possible, like innovate and use technology, whether it's to offer your products, interact with your customers, those sorts of things, right? So I think, yeah, like I said, the good thing about entrepreneurs is that we're just wired to be extremely agile. And so being able to see these trends and being able to quickly action any changes on how you operate will be critical.
Interesting. I mean, I would like to pick up particularly for the ones who are listening here and add something more on the lines of what skills will become much more important now and how they'll just take over. Because since you just talked about this trend, it just hit me for our entrepreneurs who want to be agile. What skills or or even their team members, what skills that they should focus on? I mean, let's talk about those skills for now.
Yeah, I don't see skills particularly changing. And here I am obviously speaking from, someone who's running a fintech startup. The things that have over the last few years been in vogue, whether it's digital marketing, whether it's creating content, those things will continue to be a reality in our lives. So I don't see there being a massive change in skills. However, we actually recently did this video on basis too, on this is again focusing more on like the freelancer community, but it is important to understand like things like, I don't know, let's say you're you're a wedding photographer, or you're doing like outdoor photography, right? Like reality is that's probably not going to happen for you, or that part of your business may take a hit. So there may be a need to, again, I've used the word pivot a million times, to just kind of adapt to those sorts of things, right? Like, so we talked about like, oh, if you're an outdoors photographer, wedding photographer, whatever it is, try to pivot into like food photography, something you can do, something you can do indoors, right? So those sorts of like, I think adaptations to less physical, more digital, more things you can do remotely and from home. I think that may be a trend we see, but otherwise, yeah, I don't see any kind of major, it's not like robots are taking over our jobs or, anything like that is necessarily changing from what we're going through now.
I think that's going to be really comforting for a lot of people to hear, including me, because I was under the completely different impression about it. Uh, but since you mentioned again, and I love the part that you are being very positive about this entire chain, and that sometimes it's really something that we want to hear right now. So, what do you think would be the opportunities here? In terms of monetization, since fintech is your area, and driving from there, besides that domain, what are the particular opportunities that need to be leveraged at this moment by entrepreneurs? You think?
Let's see. So opportunities. See, I think you mentioned mompreneurs, right? Like we know, uh, maybe getting out of the house is hard, etc., etc. So now there's, I guess, even more opportunity to maybe do something creative from home and monetize on, whatever your businesses from home as well. On a more generic front, I think there's a massive opportunity to do more with less, right? Like now we're just forced to, like, even with basis, we technically could have hired a lot more people, but now we're like, okay, can we really prioritize what we want to get done, looking at kind of our strategic roadmap and goals for the year, and what are ways we can extend our runway, etc. It's kind of just forced us in a very good way, I think. And as you can tell, I'm just generally a positive person, so it's easy to kind of get into that spiral where like everything's falling apart and how are we going to survive kind of a mode. But the reality is, you just, instead of trying to do five things, you pick the top three, which anyway is good, right? Focus and prioritization is good. So I think that's the opportunity. And yeah, I don't know if there are definitely some like industries or spaces that are generally going to do better, right? I mean, right now, you and I are logged into Zoom. Like, we've all seen how that company is literally, yeah, like worth, I don't know, $50 billion or something or more now. But there are going to be spaces like that, home delivery, that part of logistics, some areas that are just going to have like a massive boom, right? So if you're looking to maybe start something or even pivot your existing business, that could be a very interesting set of industries or areas to even look at.
I love how you talked about prioritization, because I think in businesses we have to make our businesses much more leaner, operations much more leaner, and that has been the talk of the town for like decades now. And yet I think this whole pandemic is kind of forcing us to focus on that, reduce the waste and become more leaner in our operations for our prioritization. I'm really glad you brought that up. Um, since, like I was talking about earlier, I want to understand, for particularly for new entrepreneurs who are in the bootstrapping phase right now,
Yeah.
and how does monetization of the business model change for them, or does it not change at all for them, or what should be their prioritization at the moment, especially for the young entrepreneurs bootstrapping at the moment?
I mean, I think it all depends on what industry you're in, right? So it's hard to kind of comment on just a generic, like, how business models will change. I think, like any business, like, stay closely in touch with your customers, right? Like, understand if their kind of desires and needs and intents are changing, right? Like, maybe their willingness to pay is different, or their priorities have changed. So I think, yeah, so in terms of business model, again, be open and flexible to even making it change, right? Like, we all go through this thing called sunk cost bias, like, oh my god, we spent all these months and years building X, we should kind of continue doing that, because we've put in all this effort already. But just kind of be on the lookout on how your customers, especially the ones that have been paying you, for instance, like, what's changing for them, and just be really, really closely in touch with them. um, and I think just having a long-term view, right? And I know this is a community of women too. I mean, women do tend to have a slightly longer term view with anything, right? Like, whether it's, I mean, we talk about investments on basis, or whether it's about building business or relationships or whatever it is. So I think that will come in super handy now, right? So just have that long-term view, understand what changes might be there for the short term, let's say for the next few months, and then what may or may not change in the long term, and kind of manage decision making based on that.
I think that kind of sums up the whole situation as well. I think we are all trying to get back to the basics of understanding the customer. It's needed much more than ever That is what I understand from your experience here. And since you mentioned about, women, since it's a women's community for now, and, we are emphasizing on, let's talk about the impact that the pandemic particularly has on women entrepreneurs. Do you think that there is a disparity or between the impact? Are women being affected more or less? What's that balance of it?
See, I don't necessarily have any specific data around that, but I think what we've all been hearing, so I think one, in general, women and work, right? Because suddenly work at home has tended to become, more, and that, and we talk about share the load and all of that, with lean in, etc. I think that has impacted how women, how much time, etc., they can actually focus on their career. And this is not specific to entrepreneurs, right? Like, it's women who do anything, freelancing or in a corporate job, are running their own business. And I've seen reports here and there on how this pandemic has actually forced some women to even quit their jobs because of, well, childcare and just managing the house, right? So as we always say, we split the load, try to see how, that doesn't just become your job as a woman to kind of take on this extra load, and see what can be done within your, well, obviously spouse, support system, etc. But I would say, again, on a more positive note, I think women, and we've seen all these reports on how these countries that are led by women have basically like managed to, combat this virus, etc. Right? So I don't think that's a coincidence, right? Like these countries specifically have been able to manage it so well. I think women do tend to deal with crises better. I think resilience. We talk about long-term thinking, empathy and compassion, all of those qualities, in some ways are just kind of wired into us, right? So I think those things will sort of help us just, pick up and do things. But yes, it does take a village, right? So it is important to get that support system in place so that you can focus on business, your work, whatever it may be.
You talked about support system. I think that's like a pivoting point that, you love the word, I know. It's like an important thing. So for entrepreneurs, and especially for women at home who are running their businesses now, they have also come up with digitized models. What could be their support models? Could it be, at home? Are we talking about more on like the community front? Or what are those particular things that they should look at? Support system at home, what are those points? Support system in the community, what is it that they should emphasize on? So what are these competing trends, or even like complementing trends for support system for women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think support systems are on multiple fronts, right? Like on the personal front, this is at home with your family, maintaining your house, just maintaining sanity at home, etc. So I think that's one support system. So it could either be people you live with, your family, it could be hired help, whatever it is, right? Obviously, I'm not a mom yet, so I don't know what it means to like sit down, and I know a lot of moms and, well, dads, a lot of parents are going through this thing on like kids not going to school and having to teach them. So just disclaimer, I personally didn't have to deal with that, but I know that does become a challenge, and that may be a harder thing to find someone to help you with it or delegate. So I think with at home it's important, right? Like if you're a parent and you're living close to your parents, or they live close by, like, just, it takes a village. I think it takes a village to build a family. It takes a village to build a business. So like create your village, right? And not only just for the physical stuff, right? It's not just to keep your house, like sane and make sure there's groceries bought and houses running, but also kind of an emotional support system, right? Like you need someone to kind of just be your cheerleader, or like push you forward, even if, let's say, your business is taking a hit for whatever reason, right? Or someone to just tell you not to quit if you think like quitting. So I think it's like an emotional plus like your physical support system at home. And even with your business, right? As women, I also see in a lot of cases where like, no, we'll just kind of do everything, and then you end up just getting exhausted because it's mental, physical, whatever. Like if you can delegate, right? We're also good at delegating, but I've seen this like trying to find the balance of, no, I can just do it, right? I'll just take care of it. And a lot of cases we can, but then it comes at the cost of just like physical, mental, I guess, well-being. And so we tend to get exhausted. So even just finding ways to delegate delegate. It's okay to relinquish control. I know we all like having a certain amount of control, but do it if it, it can give you that peace of mind. So having that support system both at work and at home. And I think that's what's going to be key, right? Because doing everything alone and taking on a lot of burden, both for work and home, is not sustainable. And we don't want women entrepreneurs or anyone else to really burn out because of that.
Glad you mentioned about the word burnout, because that's exactly what's happening around. That's what we feel. There are like anyone and everyone's just coming up with too much digital content. So I want to understand from your personal experience. I know for a fact that I look up to you for prioritization and segmentation. That's how I look up to you. So how you as an entrepreneur in these 3-4 months of surviving the situation have been able to prioritize or segment the things or pick up the projects you want to do or prioritize them? How have you been doing this since for the last quarter now?
Yeah, so I think in general, the way, and we're still an early stage company, right? So I think from the beginning, a lot of all of this was already part of our DNA, right? Like we didn't want to do everything. We were very, very careful about spreading ourselves too thin. I mean, as entrepreneurs, you have that feeling, you can conquer the world and solve all these problems, which is great. That's what sort of keeps you going, but also kind of coming back down to reality. You have limited resources. You want to not burn out, and you want to maybe make time for a few other things in life. So anyway, you have to prioritize. And so I think from the very beginning, we had kind of adopted that DNA, right? Like let's say we have 10 things on our roadmap, like really every week we're just like, what is the need of the hour? What do our customers want? Even with who we're targeting as customers of basis, because a lot of people, and we're building a platform for women, but even women as a segment, it's a very, very broad segment, right? So we're very much like even honing in on who we're building for. That helps as well, right? So we're very much building for women like you and me, urban, millennial, educated, independent women who kind of need that little bit of help and education, etc., around money, right? So I think those were all very deliberate decisions that from the very beginning made sense for us. And we do have plans for for the future in terms of how we want to expand from here, but just being okay and accepting that. And sometimes, I mean, prioritization is also and focus is also a lot about like what not to focus on, right? So it's not just like let's pick these 3 things. It's very explicitly saying, hey, we're not doing these 7 things because of ABC reasons, right? And then it's not a one-time exercise, it's a constant thing. So set up time like weekly, bi-weekly, etc., to really see like, okay, are we truly spending the limited resources we have on things that matter? But I'd also say like while this could while yeah, it is important to kind of think through and understand what will give you like best bang for your buck and the biggest ROI on your time and money and effort, also keep some room for experimentation, right? Like we don't know how certain things will play out. That's the only way we learn is through some kind of trial and error, experimentation. So sort of keep some, like allocate some time and bandwidth for that, because that's what will keep you innovating. And then the rest of it is just like, okay, this is what we've learned, this is what we know, this is why we exist, and here's where we want to be in the next 6 months, a year, etc. But I think a lot of it was like, what are we not going to do? Like, and once we take that decision, like we stick to it. Otherwise it's, again, revisiting decisions, etc., also becomes like a major use of mind space, which is also not healthy.
But what I am taking as a takeaway from this is like women entrepreneurs, or even in general, women at in this particular situation, need to learn about bravery to experiment and keep that handy. But on majority level, learn how to say no to things and things that not need to be done. I think that's a very important conversation, and there needs to be like a balance between the two. I'm really glad that you brought that forward, because it kind of helps you attain this work-life balance, which entrepreneurs, I think, genuinely struggle with.
Right.
Thank you so much for bringing that perspective. Towards the end of it, I just want to take on some light questions. Who has been your inspiration in this entire pandemic situation? This could be anyone, doesn't have to be an entrepreneur or celebrity or anyone and out. who just made it a little bit more easier for your business to survive?
I think it's multiple people, right? So my co-founder Deepika, of course, I keep telling everyone I don't know how I would be doing this without her, right? So yeah, if you also, this is also an interesting thing, if you are looking to start something, it is a lonely journey by itself, so it always helps to have, you know, a partner who's in it with you. Yes, I have a spouse and he's very supportive, etc., but there's no way he'll know kind of the day-to-day nitty-gritties of what we're doing, and I can't even expect him to, right? So he's been great in terms of just being that support, and you know, those days when we're like, oh my god, everything's falling apart, but that was more of that emotional moral support. But I think having Deepika, and there are days when, you know, and in any kind of small business's life, the early years are a lot of just surviving, right? And so you have to face those ups and downs. It's mostly downs, which is by design. But so I think just having her to even bounce of, whether it's ideas, whether it's just having a bad day, whatever it is, right? And I would say her and my husband for more of the moral and emotional part.
That's lovely. That's actually lovely. Just towards the end, what's one message that Hena would want to give entrepreneurs right now listening to this conversation? One quick message for them.
Um, One quick message. Okay. I would say just be nimble, right? Like, it's, as entrepreneurs, we tend to feel married to our ideas and our what we've built and how we've built it. I think if anything, this pandemic has taught us that we do have to be flexible, right? So while it's ingrained in us that we have to be persistent and, you know, continue doing something and trying, like, there is going to be a point where you just have to just accept that, you know, maybe this is not working, or this business model is changed, or I may have to just, you know, quickly tweak it to do something else. One example actually is, we spoke to this entrepreneur in Mumbai who runs a trucking company, right? So her customers were restaurants, and then, as we all know, restaurants have been shut for a while. So she literally, and her story was so inspiring. She said within 7 days, we basically, I mean, we knew we had this infrastructure of trucks, so it's like, okay, what else can we use it for? And then she converted it into like a grocery delivery logistics thing, right? So I think that's a great example. Like, yes, you have built something, and try to understand what else it could be used for. And sorry, I know this is not a quick message, but then on the flip side, I also know entrepreneurs who've had to completely switch industries, right? Like, there are entrepreneurs who are in travel related businesses, who basically had to like move what industry they're in, because as we all know, that's one major industry that's taken a big hit. So I've seen all kinds of just general nimbleness, agility, etc., and all of these happen to be women. So it's been very inspiring.
I think that's inspiring. The example that you just mentioned, I was like, okay, I was thinking, what can they do about it? But that's really amazing.
Yeah.
And I think I'm glad that you have all these community, women around you who inspire you. And I think that's what the whole point of this conversation and our, organizations and communities are all about. Inspiring each other, especially in these difficult times. So thank you so much, Hena, for making out time today for the community members. And I believe there's so much more work that we can all do together to provide support in whatever way we possibly can. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, not at all. And if there are more questions from the community or whatever, I'm happy to chat more.
Absolutely. So we'll be posting this on our platform, thestarandme.com. And if there are any follow-up questions, we will definitely open the forum for discussion. And just on a leaving note, what are the best ways that the members could reach out to you, or the platforms that they should reach out to you besides thestarandme.com, when we'll be posting this?
You could add me on LinkedIn. Do check out our app, actually. And I know it's a little bit of a shameless plug for what we're doing, but we've put in a lot of thought into our content, and the education and financial well-being, etc., has become sort of the need of the hour as well, right? So do check it out. I'm on that community like all day long, pretty much. So you can find me there too, and feel free to ask any questions related to money as well, if that's kind of something that's top of mind. But yeah, these are sort of ways to get in touch.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to the discussion that opens up after this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rashmi.